Okay, welcome to day 3. It is 1 minute before this session is going to get started. We had to troubleshoot because for some reason Zoom, the webinar, was not available. So we shifted now to a regular Zoom meeting, sent out the recording, and everybody's going to be joining, hopefully through that recording or through that new link. So we'll wait, give everybody time. Joseph, you can leave yourselves on your video off if you want. That might even help the bandwidth. And we're going to give some time because obviously you all who joined early, you got the link, and I'm going to give a few minutes for people to realize that the webinar link was not available, some glitch in Zoom. So we had to shift to this modality. So hang tight. Let's give people a few minutes to join, and then we'll kick off day 3. It's always exciting, always interesting when you get thrown a curveball, and it's an adventure for sure. So we'll give people a few minutes to hopefully get on. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm. Maybe while we're waiting, have you all been checking out some of the talks, the recorded talks? And if so, any comment, any suggestion, you can throw it in the chat space, or you can, I think, just unmute yourself. And if you want to just, make a comment, let's make sure the chat space is working. Yes. Okay. Anybody? Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, we'll just get started. And hopefully people will just be able to access. Let me see something. This is the first session I've been able to attend. Haven't checked out any recordings yet. Okay, cool. Well, welcome. And, did you purchase, John? Did you purchase it? Are you going to get a chance to access some of these, or are you just going to get these for the next day or so?
Yeah, I was introduced to this series by Warren. I've taken his classes before, and there was some, I don't know, I couldn't get the links to work. There was some discrepancy with the time zones. So I think I showed up realizing that, whoops, it's somehow or another, it got on my calendar in the wrong time zone. So it had already come and gone. So I'm planning to check out the recordings, just haven't had a chance to do that yet.
Okay, great. All right, cool. All right, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm pretty bummed out that this kind of glitch happened with the webinar, because I'm assuming that we've been getting a lot of people to these live sessions, and I'm assuming we're about to get flooded through my email saying, why didn't the webinar link work? And that's unfortunate. Hopefully my assistant can kind of resolve that while we're while we're doing this. But what my game plan is to just basically speak to all the people, and they will be able to access the recording of this. So maybe people will get the link. It was sent 5 minutes ago, and hopefully they will. If not, they'll get the recordings. So where I wanted to start, with this day 3 opener is I wanted to revisit um, day 1. And during the live session, there were a couple of questions that came up, and I wanted to unravel those or go a little bit deeper. A man asked, he said that he was kind of working with his 17-year-old son, and his big, you could feel it in his voice. He was tuning into his own struggles throughout his life, which it sounds like he made it through, at least reasonably. But then now he's looking at his 17-year-old son. And, where do I start? That was his question. Where do I start? And I can so appreciate that question. And I'm going to give you all my perspective on that vital question. Where do I start? You're working with a young man, or you are a young man, and you wake up to almost this nightmare, this disaster. And some people describe it like waking up in the middle of February naked on Times Square in the broad daylight. It's like it just comes at you full force. And what do I do? Where do I go? Where do I start? How do I do this? And it can be very, very overwhelming. And I learned a perspective, I'll say. And my work with young men starts with a perspective. Okay. When I work with young men, I look at them as though I would look at a plant. Okay. Whether it's a plant in your home or a plant in your garden or some plant you see, and you're looking at this plant and it's got all kinds of problems, right? It's not bearing fruit. It's withering. It looks sickly. Maybe it's overgrown in certain areas, going wild. It's a mess. And you're looking at this plant and you're like, what the hell do I do with this plant? And, for us as young men, and again, I'm not going to even differentiate totally if I'm talking to young men or people that are working with young men. Because it's really the same, because you go on this journey together. What happens when that plant is exhibiting all these problems? Well, you go for help, right? You eventually go for help, and the help gives you a diagnosis. If you're growing all over the place, it says, well, you have ADHD, you can't focus. If you're withering, it says, oh, you're depressed. If you're real weak and meekly, you have anxiety. And these things start to stack one on top of the other. So by the time I am called into a situation of working with a young man, usually the parents hand me a binder of all the problems. And it's of no use. I tell them it's of no use to me. It is of no use to me to know all of these fancy diagnoses that they've been given by psychiatrists, by psychologists, by whomever. The bottom line is, why is that plant not thriving? See, I go to the level, what I call the primal level. That plant has within itself all of the information, all of what it needs to grow. Why isn't it growing? Well, in the life of a plant, we pretty much go to the basics, like it's in an area that's not receiving enough sunlight, or maybe it's receiving too much sunlight. It's not getting enough water. Um, what are the basics that are happening with that plant? And I've trained myself not to get distracted by the surface level things, because the surface level of what's going on with the plant is very distracting and very disturbing and very overwhelming. So the key is to get into the heart of what is going on at a deeper level. And if there's one, I guess, criticism that I have in against with my field, it's that they get too distracted by what's going on the surface, and that becomes very complicated, very overwhelming. And then you're trying solution on top of solution on top of solution, and you totally lose your way. So the question then becomes, how do we take that, and how did I take that metaphor of the plant and apply it to young men? Okay. Well, if you've checked out my book, The Primal Method, I tell you how it started. And how it started is I started working with a young man in his 20s who was the prototypical lost, stuck, depressed, anxious, and he was the prototypical young man. And they were trying to send this young man to a long-term involuntary institution where he was going to remain indefinitely and involuntarily. And I had a hunch that that was not the way to go. There was something that really touched me about this young man. And so his parents also disagreed with that. And so we formulated this plan where I was going to start working, with this young man and just do the best I can. Right. And the only thing that I had on my side was that they were allowing me to meet with him as much as I want. And they were really open to all of my suggestions. So I start off working with this young man. I start using all the methods and all the techniques that I had normally used, and none of them worked. Nothing worked. And so in the midst of that desperation and the desire to really help that young man, we made a simple decision, which was we were just going to leave the office. Okay. I refused to meet with him in an office environment. And in the book, I explained that that was the initial domino, that just by leaving the office, this whole method over the course of 4 to 5 years evolved. And none of that was clear to me at the beginning. The only thing I knew at the beginning was that nothing I was doing was working, and we needed to try something different. And it was incredibly boring and frustrating for both this young man and me. So we made the decision to leave the office. And through that, this whole method and this whole approach came into being, an approach which I've now used successfully with that client and every man that I've worked with since then. So it's something that now it is being perfected over time with other men. So what did I learn that I could now share with you? How do you approach a stuck, lost, dying young man? Well, the first thing that I learned is that I just had to spend time with them. I just had to be present with them. And when I was present with them, all of my mind was trying to fix them and diagnose them and all of this other stuff. And I just discounted all of that. And I focused on one simple thing, and that was connecting with that young man. And that's what I did with him. And that's what I've done ever since. So the secret to how to revive that plant is attention. It's it's presence. It's just being with them, right? But there's more to it because I can feel, you know, especially people who are in the helper role, like, okay, you're saying that what I should do with my son or my client is just go spend time with them, right? But it's not that easy, because when you go and spend time with these young men, the key is, how do you do that in a way that you can provide something for them while protecting yourself? What does that mean, protect yourself? Well, their energy and their life is going in a negative direction. That's the problem. They're going in a negative direction. If you go and you enter their life, how are you going to negotiate it? And how are you going to negotiate so that you don't just follow them, and then you're going to end up feeling depressed and lost? And every parent that I've ever worked with has described that phenomenon, that they try to help, but they're getting more negatively affected. And I can understand that, you know. So I'll give you an analogy that I use, and I hope this is helpful for young men and for helpers. Let's imagine that you have a planet, okay? And that planet has its own orbit, okay? It's orbiting very fast, or it's orbiting slow. It has a spin to it. It has other planets in its system, and it has a whole life to it, okay? That planet is the young man, okay? The other planets are his friends, his hobbies, his habits. We should call them habits, probably, because most of the time it's negative. There's a whole world there. How do you enter that, for lack of a better word, solar system? How do you enter that and be of any positive um, addition to it? Well, the hard thing is to not get sucked into that that whole sick system, right? Suddenly, the mother that is so worried about her kid using drugs is like, well, I'd rather him use drugs in my house than have to go out and risk getting hurt on the streets. It's better that he's using in the basement. Or last week I was at a conference, and a friend of mine, a colleague, was telling me about parents who, their daughter was sleeping around. She was 14 and sleeping around with guys in their late 20s just to get access to drugs. And the parent was like, well, you know, at least she's not out on the street where she can get harmed. We know what's happening. And it's so scary and sad when you hear these stories, because you can appreciate how how lost the parent is, how disempowered, and how crazy that system is, right? That's a perfect example of what we call enabling. You have people who are supposed to be helpers that have now been sucked into this sick system, and now they are a part of the system. So for you helpers, the first key is, if you're going to enter that system, you cannot become a part of that sickness. And how you do that is, and how I did it, is you have to remain utterly committed to your own health, to your own truth. You have to find a way to keep going in pursuit of what you know to be right and pure and loving, all of your values. If you can imagine, you as a planet, you have to keep your orbit smooth, right? So now keep your orbit smooth. So we don't allow ourselves to cope by using chemicals, right? If we do that, then our orbit, now we're just becoming a part of that system. So you have to keep your orbit smooth. The system is going to try to get you out of whack, but your job is just to stay within that. Let the system do what it is, but all you want to do is try to get into a little bit of a relationship for a little while with that young person, that man. Then he's going to go do his thing, but then you can get it. And over time, it becomes more of a primary relationship. So it's a law that when you start, I don't know why, but I feel like I'm talking more to helpers in this talk. So be it. If you're a young man out there, after you listen to this, you can ask a question of how this should apply to you, or how it can apply to you. It's a law that when I start working with a young man, I cannot impose my presence too much. If I impose my presence too much, then that system is they're going to leave, because they're going to sense that you're going to try to change everything, and that's not going to work. So the first step is just to allow them to get into your orbit only as much as they're willing. So when I work with young men, I would always start and say, hey, Nick, do you want to hang out? Sure. How about we just go out and do something, and we'll just hang out for a little while. Okay. Now I'm mindful when I'm with that person how much they can tolerate being with me. If it's a half an hour, great. If it's an hour, great. If it's 2 hours, great. Most of my clients, in the beginning, it starts out very small, but then we work up to normally like 2 or 3 hour sessions. And most of my clients, I do a 3-day trip with them where we're with each other all the time. So it really builds on itself. But that all starts with just the simple, I'm going to actually pin my video because that's going to be better for recording. Perfect. Okay. Let me see this. Full screen. Okay, good. So that's how it works. So you start by just getting in a relationship with them. So if you're a parent or a professional and you're wondering how this might work, you really have to relearn the way that you're spending time with this young man. Okay. If you're a young man out there listening to this, the only thing that I can tell you is that if you want your life to change, you have to allow a positive presence to enter your life. Everybody starts by trying to eliminate all the negative presences. And usually that works, but by the time, it only works for a little while, because by the time your life has gotten so out of whack, you are the negative presence. You are the problem. I know, you're not the problem. I wasn't the problem. It was my friends and it was this person. But after, years and years, you are the problem. I was the problem and you are too. And so eliminating negative presences is only going to work for a small amount of time. You have to seek and allow positive presence to be in your life, preferably a male. Because if you've listened to the talk so far, lost, stuck young men, what we are most missing is the presence and the power of maleness and a mentor. And a mentor is simple. It's just somebody who is pursuing something good in life and they're willing to share time and space with you. It isn't, the proverbial big brother where you guys are sitting on a rock and you put your head on his shoulder and cry your eyes out. That's not necessarily what it is. You just want to feed off of how that mentor, how that man is approaching his life. And that's something that works and has worked through the ages. And in the book, I call it's the lost art of men making men. It's the biggest thing missing. Dr. Farrell, he's studied this. I really don't know if I did a great job interviewing him. I was kind of pissed off because I don't know that I convinced the audience or extracted from Warren that he has been studying this in essentially like the living laboratory. He's a social psychologist. He has been studying this in all cultures. And so is Michael Gurian, Dr. Michael Gurian. And they've studied this for more than 2 decades. And what they both see, the biggest problem is the lack of a male presence in young men. That is something that their research has concluded. So that is the biggest problem. So that's what I aim to offer. And if you are a young man, really the question becomes, where can you find these men? Where can you find these men that can have an impact on you? And this is going to be the harder part, and I'm going to offer some help in this regard. It's going to be, how do you clear up your channel? How do you clear up the road between you and that man? Because if you've grown up in a culture where this men making men has not been practiced, you're going to have tons of barriers, obstacles, and resistance to that. That's why young men cannot just pick up their bed and carry it. They can't heal themselves because they've never been taught how to spend time productively with other men that are further along than them. And this is something that I see at every level, every age of our culture here in America, especially. Men don't want to spend time with more superior men, people that can have an influence on them. So even the younger guys in their 30s and 20s that are doing well, what they're doing is they are getting into a group of themselves, just their 20-year-olds. That's a very safe space, right? Because we're all even. But when you are with somebody who is more powerful, more advanced than you, all of your fear is going to kick in, right? All this crap that has been put in your head by our culture to fear male power, all of your upbringing, you're afraid of your dad or the principal that yelled at you, that's when the rubber's going to hit the road. So, but you're going to have to work through that. And there is a way to work through that. So I'm going to help you with that. Okay. So that's one thing I wanted to address. A second question that came up in the first day was from a woman who said that her son, who was in his 30s, was still judging her for basically how she was in his life. And I said it then and I'll say it now. I have no idea what the woman did. Maybe she was a horrible person and did horrible things. However, I will tell you that the men that I have worked with, and I really wanted to bring them on, and in the future, I will bring them on to talks like this. They have gone through more than anybody could share. They have gone through horror shows. And when I meet them for the first time, I always tell them, what do you want to do about your past? Do you want to continue to live out your past? Do you want to continue to do that? Look at yourself. Where has that gotten you? Where has it gotten you? Do you want to continue to be miserable, angry, frightened? All this, do you want that to be your life, or do you want to change? All the men that worked with me made a decision to change. And at the time, all I was going on and all they were going on is a hope that no matter how damaged the plant gets, it can revive itself. Well, now, thankfully, I can sit here with authority and say, I have taken plants that were dead to rights, and we have seen them now flourishing. People who were adopted at age 3, sent to Russian orphanages, never saw their biological parents or siblings again, were begging on the streets, and then were adopted by a good family here in America. But then, of course, all that pain came out, and they went down the life of addiction and crime and all that stuff. They have reformed their life. They are happy. They are employed. They have a purpose. They have sober. In other words, now we know if they can do it, so can you. And if I can do it, so can you. So all the excuses have been taken away. So that's the first thing. It's up to you. We live in a society today that celebrates victimhood. Okay, that's where we live. If that's the route that you want to take, I am a victim. I have been victimized. I am traumatized. My life is over. My psychologist told me that. My psychologist told me that. My society and my psychiatry, everybody told me that. Okay, I'm not going to argue with you, but I can tell you that I've seen everybody overcome all manner of trauma, and it's not complicated. It goes back to some of the things that I said at the beginning of this talk. It's connection. It's making a commitment to work through the barriers to connection. So for the mother that said, my child is still judging me, and what can I do? Well, the question really is, how long are you going to agree with what your son is, what he has decided? How long are you going to agree with that? Okay. And I thought of a story that I really wanted to share with the group, and I'm going to share that. It's one of the most impactful stories that has happened in my life. So once upon a time, I was working at an adolescent rehab. It was the second job that I worked at in my career. And it's about 40 adolescents in the program, bunch of counselors. And the kids would come after school. And they were forced to come because they had been arrested or the school caught them using drugs. So it was an involuntary program. So it was always a circus in that environment. And I remember this one guy, he was probably about 17. I'll call him, I don't know, Rick. And Rick he was a bigger, stronger kid. I knew and had heard that he was an excellent baseball player. He was one of the star pitchers and actually had a future as a baseball player. But he was angry and he was defiant. And his parents, who were separated but both involved, um, they could not reel him in. And despite his love, passion, and talent in athletics, his addiction kept getting the best of him. And he was a monster in the home, breaking things, threatening, even getting physical with his mother. And some of the women on this call can relate. Like, yeah, my son has gotten physical with me, intimidating and threatening. Well, of course, when Rick came to our program, Rick acted out those same tendencies. He wanted to bully and push us around and try to intimidate us physically and threaten us. And fortunately, it was myself and the counselors. We were alert to his, power, but we were not going to go along with the intimidation. So we held the line, and he got a lot better through the program. And I was his counselor. Okay. And when I'll never forget, it was like a 3-month program. When he was finishing, he came up to me and he thanked me. He said, "Thank you. If you had not been strong with me, I'd be dead." And okay, but that's not why I'm telling you this story, because that happened all the time. What was most interesting is what happened on his final day. On the final day, we always had an exercise in what's called a fishbowl, where you have all the parents and all the kids in a huge circle. And in the center of the circle, in the center of that fishbowl, we do work. So a family will go in and they'll be given an assignment and they present it and then they get feedback. And it's really quite beautiful to watch. One of my favorite, you always feel the intensity when you're in that situation, and you never know what's going to happen. And it's really like theater. Well, in this case, the mother was giving what is called an impact letter to Rick, where she was reading how his addiction impacted her. And she started reading and she started reciting the things that I said to you all. You got physical with me. You threw me on the floor one time. You broke my wrist. I was up all night worrying about you. And the spirit of this letter is not to guilt or to shame. It's to raise awareness in the person on what it's really like to live with them. But again, that was not the power of this exercise in this moment, because all the parents would do that. What was most powerful was the end, where she read her letter and she looked at her son and she said, "Rick, I want to apologize to you." Everybody's quiet. What? I want to apologize. I want to apologize for holding you to a standard that is subhuman. I apologize for tolerating things that I wouldn't tolerate from an animal. I'm sorry. And she meant it. She had agreed with her son. She had sacrificed and become complicit in that negative orbital system that I described to you. And she realized it. And she exited the system and realized the role that she was playing. This was an incredible moment. And I never forget that. The mother that apologized to her son for allowing the behavior. Now, that she had a lot of support. So if you're here, please don't go and tell your son this stuff, because it's not going to go well for you. We had a lot of support, and we had worked 3 months, and he was sober for at 2 months, I think, at that time. Well, that's the power of that type of a group environment. And that's the power of working with people that know how to enter that orbit. They can show you. So this is what we do. So I think if I was to say, if you take both these stories and this example, these examples that I've been given, it's all about, how to be a positive presence in a sick system. And this is why I put together the summit, is to give you some knowledge of what's going on with that planet, right? Honestly, I think it will be very hard for you as a young man to watch these things and identify yourself, because the awareness is hard to create, but it's there for you. And if you sit down and you watch it and you try to hear and see yourself in what these people are saying, it is my hope that you begin to raise your awareness. And sometimes watching a talk like that, like one of these interviews, can have a very powerful effect in your life. Sometimes it can be just watching one of those that can be the domino in your life, like I was the domino in my client's life. The final thing I want to say is going back to something that was said in my interview with Cater Brown on day one. And he talked about the difference between good trouble and bad trouble. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but good trouble, you're not going to be able to avoid trouble. So part of the problem is everybody's looking for a clean, flawless victory. It's not going to happen. Okay. Regardless of how this all turns out, you're going to have trouble in your life. Good trouble for me is defined as trouble, natural trouble that comes as a result of pursuing something worthy in life. Good trouble comes as a result of natural, you are moving towards something, you are attempting to do something, and trouble comes. It happens in all of our life. And that's natural. You feel like you're going somewhere, and the challenge is a part of that journey. The bad trouble is when you're going nowhere. Bad trouble is when you are taking your own gun and shooting yourself in the foot for no reason. Bad trouble is where you're not able to make any progress in life. That is not the type of trouble that we're looking for. But I can tell you that the result of all this work is not that you're going to be trouble-free, but that you're going to have good trouble, and you're going to feel as though you're going somewhere in your life. And that the challenges are there to basically propel you and test you. So today, day 3 is mostly about the body. I put day 3 together because when I'm working with young men, issues in the body are always at the forefront. And that's particularly the case in today, where young men are being lured into the cyber world. They're becoming increasingly disconnected with their bodies. And I'll just give one example. Dr. John Strax, who I interviewed today, he will be interviewed today. He's a medical doctor, but he understands the role of emotions in creating pain. See, when I work with young men, as I'm working with you, I need you to engage in life. I need us to go out into life, whether it's boxing or hiking or yoga or running. We need to go out into life and see what life has to offer that you're going to enjoy, or better yet, that you're going to learn to enjoy, because that's the problem. You don't know how to enjoy life. You need to learn to enjoy life, but in order to learn to enjoy life, you have to participate in it. And what happens every time is, well, I want to participate. I want to go try jujitsu, but my shoulder's been bothering me for years. Okay. So in that case, we have two options. Number one is the shoulder has a problem and it's been neglected. So we got to go to a doctor, get it diagnosed, and get the treatment and fix it. Don't just leave it. But also, that shoulder pain is not real. That's your emotional body that is holding you back from life. And for the men that I work with to make progress, they need to understand that. They need to see that, because otherwise they're never going to leave their couch, their knee, their foot, their back, their neck, everything. That my interview with John Strax, Dr. John Strax, is an attempt for me to give you a window into what's really going on in your body. Then I'm interviewing Carol. She's developed integral breath therapy. Most young men don't know how to breathe. Most men don't know how to breathe. I don't know how to breathe. I'm retraining myself how to breathe. And all the disturbances in our breath is a result of armor, psychological armor which needs to be taken off if you're going to have success in life. So day 3 is about the body. And we end it also with a story. As I said, I've worked with people that have overcome all obstacles. So I interviewed somebody who has overcome tremendous obstacles in his life, obstacles that 95% of people use as excuses. He used as a springboard to become the man that he wants to be. So that's what you have in store for you today. I truly hope that you enjoy day 3. It is going to be, it's going to be a great day. I'm very pleased with how all these interviews turned out and excited for you to check them all out. And please tune in today at 4:30 for the wrap up. At that time, I'm going to say then what I'm also going to say right now, because I've been promising you that some assistance for helpers and for young men. I am starting 2 master classes starting next month. One is for emerging men in their 20s and 30s. It's a 3-week program. It is discounted for the next 48 hours to the lowest price that it's ever going to be, $197. I wanted to make it completely affordable for all emerging men to join us in this masterclass. I'm going to take you through 3 weeks of how to make a breakthrough in your life. You're going to get exclusive live access with me. There are hour sessions each week. And for helpers, there's going to be a 4-week masterclass, also for the next 48 hours, discounted to $397 for the 4 weeks. These are going to be the lowest prices that this is going to be offered. I wanted to make it totally accessible for people that participated in the summit that want to take a next step in their journey of learning how to live their best life as a young man or help a young man find his power. So that's where we are headed. I will say it again. You can find that stuff on my website, brothergregory.com. I'm just going to check and see, do we have anything we need to attend to? I don't think so. So, all right. Well, I hope this was a good, fabulous. Thank you. Thank you, Marie. Thank you for that feedback. This is going to be recorded. It has been recorded, and it will be up. So if you know people that would benefit from this, you can still, let me get rid of this because sometimes you can still access the summit for free, by signing up. I think it's available until tomorrow. So send them the link. They can have access to this talk. Anybody who you feel will benefit from it. Have a great day. We'll see you back here 4:30 Eastern time.